The Sikha we will be learning will be Parshas Brocho. It talks about the end of Parsha Brocho, where it talks about the histalkus of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Pasuk says there, "Vayivku bnei Yisrael as Moshe b'arbes meyav shleishim yom," that the Bnei Yisrael cried, which means they mourned, but the word means that they cried. The Bnei Yisrael cried for 30 days. And then the Pasuk continues about Yeshua, and then the Pasuk continues about the Milas, the specialty of Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Rebbe says here in the Sikha, "Benegedem chilik zwischen der Pchia von Niden of Moshe Rabbeinu und der Pchia of Aaron Hakeim lachris talkusam." If you look at the Psukim, the difference, the Torah describes how the Yidden cried after Moshe Rabbeinu versus the way the Torah describes when Aaron Hakeim died, how the Yidden cried there. That by Aaron steht vayivku gemer kol Beis Yisrael. By Aaron it says that all of Beis Yisrael means the whole Jewish community cried after him when he passed away. And by Moshe steht vayivku bnei Yisrael. And by Moshe it just says the bnei Yisrael, which refers the bnei Yisrael didn't cry, but it doesn't say kol Beis Yisrael. So in the Farant Zwei Perushim, which Pashtas, it means that by Moshe Rabbeinu not so many people cried like by Aaron. By Aaron everybody cried, by Moshe not everybody. So there are two pshat in why. One pshat is Aleph. B'shas Aaron is installed geworden. When Aaron passed away, is mit Neprias Moshe of Aaron and Bocha Kulam L'Kvede V'Yirosei. Now, since Moshe Rabbeinu also mourned, cried after Aaron passed away, so because of the covet and the awe that they had to Moshe Rabbeinu, and they saw how Moshe cried, they all cried. That's why by Aaron's passing, it says Kol Beis Yisrael. Mashenkin noch misas Moshe, but after Moshe passed away, was lei hoya godel k'Moshe shebocha. There was nobody as great as Moshe that cried after Aaron. Leibocha Eloha Noshim. So there only the men cried. So this pshat in Chazal is that when it says Ayivku bnei Yisrael by Moshe, it means only the men, bnei, the men, the Loshem Bonim, Loshem Zochar, and Kol Beis Yisrael means also the women. So why by Moshe, by Aaron, even the woman cried, and by Moshe only the men? So this pshat says because by Aaron, Moshe Rabbeinu cried after him, so he was so great that when everyone saw him crying, everybody cried, even the woman. But when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, there was no one that was so great as Moshe Rabbeinu. The Mele, not everybody cried, so only the men cried. Another pshat is, V'meishin hom blazes chorim geveint, Mashenke ba'aden shoyredev sholem. V'neisim sholem, v'nish l'rei, v'nish l'baylo, ne'emer kol beis Yisrael, chorim in the caves. That by Moshe, only the men cried. But when it came by, but was by Aaron, everybody cried, the men and the women. Why? Because Aaron was Reidev Sholem. Aaron ran after peace. He made Sholem, he made peace between man and another man, between a woman and her husband. So since he made Sholem between people, so everybody cried when he passed away, men and women. So the Rebbe explains like this, like National Pirish Komtois, according to the first shot comes out, at the Adgosha from Vayivku bnei Yisrael, B'lei Zanoshim, that when the Torah stresses by Moshe that the Bnei Yisrael cried, which means only men, need Kol Beis Yisrael v'Ba'aron, and not Kol Beis Yisrael, which is like Ba'aron, that everybody cried, including the women. So that brings that brings out the special mile of Moshe. As Le'yiniach Godel K'Moshe was I'm Chiyas Volgerim Zayin, so Vayivku Kol Beis Yisrael. It shows how great Moshe is. That after Aaron, because Moshe was there and he cried, he was so great that made everybody cry. But after Moshe, there was not anybody as great as Moshe, but that's what didn't cry. So it brings out how great Moshe was. That if he wasn't there to cry, because it was his passing himself, so Mele, not everybody cried. According to the second pshat, is the opposite. The Zelba Goshen, the same stress that we're saying, that the Pasuk tells us that by Moshe only the men cried, not like by Aaron when the men and women cried. Bring Tarus as by Moshe the Rinyan from Avor Sholem did give him Betachas Hashem to Aaron. It doesn't bring out a Mile Moshe. The contrary, it brings about a Mile in Aaron. That why Taka didn't everybody cry after Moshe? Because he's not in making peace between people. He wasn't as great as Aaron. So according to the first pshat, the fact that the Torah stresses here that only the men cried brings out the Mile of Moshe. That by Aaron, because of Moshe, everyone cried, and here there was nobody like that. So it brings out the mile of Moshe. But according to the other pshat, it brings out the mile of Aaron. That by Aaron, because he was greater in making Sholem, That's why everybody cried. Moshe wasn't that great in that aspect, and therefore not everybody cried. But if so, it's the more the Rebbe says not understood. So he's moving as dort was retzich wegen Misas Moshe. He's massing to the Tzeilen seine Meiles. It makes sense that when it talks about Moshe Rabbeinu's passing, there fits to talk about Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness, the specialty of Moshe, his Meiles. In the Psukim Kufu, we see here in the Psukim at the end of Brocho, where it talks about Moshe's passing, it says Moshe that his eyes never became weak. There was no prophet ever like Moshe, and it says mentions all the miracles that he did, the strong hand, all these miles that it talks about Moshe, because that's what it fits. When you talk about the passing of Moshe, you talk about the miles of Moshe. So if so, vi pasdo die hat Goshe, aber Moshe is not given the shleimste Meile von Avos schon libaren. So how does it fit here that the Torah would stress that Moshe is not so great in bringing peace between people like Aaron? So you're bringing out like a Meile in somebody else over Moshe, which is kilo as if a chasson in Moshe. When we're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu's histalkus, that's the place to talk about his Meiles. The question is even stronger when we pay attention to how Rashi puts it, because Rashi brings this second pshat that we said, he brought on in Rashi. But look at the way Rashi brings it. Rashi zogt, this is what Rashi says. Bnei Yisrael, when it says Bnei Yisrael, he says haschodim. It's the men, the males. Avo ba'aren, but ba'aren, b'teich shoyeredev sholem v'neisiv sholem v'nishal reyu v'nishal abaylo, nemer kol beis Yisrael, kol beis Yisrael, schodim on the caves. But by Aaron, because he was chasing peace and he made peace between man and man, and between the husband and their a wife and her husband, that's why it says by him, kol beis Yisrael, which includes schodim and the caves, male and female. That's how Rashi says it. L'chure, Rashi is blaze, uisten zu verentfen, verwos bei Aaron steht kol beis Yisrael, by Moshe b'nei Yisrael. L'chure, what Rashi is trying to do here, bepash this. He's trying to answer Akash. B'chal Rashi only writes a Pirish when he's coming to answer a kasha or to explain something. So Rashi here, when you come to this pasuk, there's an obvious kasha. When someone learns the pasuk where it says Vayifku Bnei Yisrael, that the Yisrael cried, so anybody who remembers what it said by Aaron, and over there it says Kol Beis Yisrael, everybody. So right away there's a kasha. Why over there was Kol Beis Yisrael and here it's not Bnei Yisrael? So Rashi comes to answer. The answer is because by Aaron, more people cried because Aaron made Sholem and Moshe didn't. But if that's all Rashi is interested in doing, what Rashi the meat gedacht on dem dominion, Rashi should have started with this. He should have said like this. After he says the words Bnei Yisrael, meaning Schorim, he should have said that means the Schorim only the men, not the women. Then Rashi should have continued. If he's answering the kasha, so Rashi should have written right away the kasha. Uba'arei nemra kol beis Yisrael Schorim unekevis would be a kasha. How come by Aaron it says kol beis Yisrael, which means men and women? And then you should have given the reason, you should give the answer. Because Aaron chased peace and made peace, more peace than Moshe. That's why it says by Aaron. But Rashi doesn't do that. Rashi starts off after he says by Moshe Rabbeinu, who cried only the males. Then right away he says, but Aaron, he starts right away with Aaron, doesn't ask a kasha. So right away he brings that Aaron made peace between people. And it goes very detailed into this. Especially Rashi didn't even have to go into so many details because Rashi already said this. When it speaks about the stalkus of Aaron, Rashi explained it already. So since Rashi comes after he says that by Moshe it was only the males, he starts by saying, but Aaron, because he was Reid of Sholem, it says there that everybody cried, is mashme. As Rashi is nicht nur zum Beweis an dem Tag hechrech, aber Yisrael ne Yisrael von unter Posse mit Aschonim. Rashi is not only interested in tell us that by us when it says Bnei Yisrael, it means only the men, because if you compare it to what it says by Aaron Kol Beis Yisrael, so we understand here it was less. And his Rashi is trying to answer that. It's not only that. Rashi is trying to tell us the Maila of Aaron over Moshe in them minya from Avor Shalom concerning Avor Shalom. That's what Rashi says. It says by Moshe, Rashi says the males, and then Rashi says not as a kasha. How come by Aaron it says different? He says by here it was only the males, but by Aaron had a bigger mile. So it seems that Rashi is trying to tell us that the pasuk is trying to tell us the mile of Aaron. So it's Tamua. So it's not understood. As though by meaning from Nistalkas Moshe here, when we're talking about Moshe's passing, we should go into explaining and in laying the opposite of the Mile of Moshe compared to Aaron. That's what seems Rashi is doing. He's telling us that Moshe was only the Schor, but by Aaron was better. Aaron had more. Aaron had the Cholem. But why would the Torah do that in the place where we're talking about the Stalkers of Moshe? We can't answer because the contrary. He said, because Moshe Rabbeinu was so great, Torah has to make sure. Since Moshe Rabbeinu is so great, so you would think that you have to follow everything Moshe does, nothing more, because Moshe is very, very great. The Torah has to tell us, has been a gay dominion, that you should know concerning this union, which is Avas Yisrael, Vavor Sholem, loving the other Yidden and bringing peace between Yidden. It's not enough. Shouldn't be satisfied with just behaving like by Moshe. You have to learn from Aaron. In other words, the reason why the Rebbe is saying, you might answer that the reason why the Torah says it here when it talks about Misa of Moshe, because when you talk about Misa of Moshe, so you bring out the specialty of Moshe. So you might think that that's good enough. If you behave like Moshe, it's good enough. So the Torah said, Rashi explains, the Torah has to tell us that you should know that Lepel in this union you have to follow Aaron, which is greater than Moshe. That's what the Torah wants to tell us, but you can't say that. But Lechura is nido derort of them. Because here wouldn't be the place. As much as the Torah wants to tell us, it should say it someplace else. But when we are talking about the Stalkos of Moshe, why would we then make a point to mention that it's not enough to follow Moshe, you got to follow Aaron? It doesn't belong here. Is there full movement for that? We understand that. B'shas learn the meaning from the Stalkos Moshe, that when we're learning the concept of Moshe's passing, is there buying the gates of Yisrael and Moshe and Aaron? It's important when we talk about Moshe's passing to know the difference between Moshe and Aaron, including the Mile of Aaron. It's important when we talk about the Stalkos of Moshe. And the fire is the posik domad gishvayivkubnei Yisrael as Moshe. That's why here, when it talks about the Stalkos of Moshe, the Torah stresses that Bnei Yisrael cried after Moshe. What Rashi is Mavayan, and the Rashi explains, which means he's Megala, he reveals the depth of this pshat. The mitzvah, the posik ondait, yes, the Torah is trying to tell us here the mile of Aaron over Moshe. As by him, given Reid of Sholem, the Nation Sholem, by him, he was chasing peace, and he made peace between a person and his friend, between a woman, a wife and her husband, etc., etc. In other words, Rashi is telling us, yes, when it talks about the Stalkos of Moshe, it's important to tell us the mile of Aaron over Moshe. Rabbi didn't explain it yet, but he says we must say that the Pasuk is interested in telling us the mile of Aaron over Moshe when we talk about the Stalkos of Moshe. But the question is why? If we talk about the Stalkos of Moshe, why is it important over there? Gabe Moshe's Stalkos to tell us the mile of Aaron over Moshe. Wetten das verstehen behagdim. The Rebbe says we'll understand it by first bringing in Hatam, was by Moshe gefindt man nicht bei meinem Orach Chazal. Why? What's the reason that by Moshe we don't find the Maborim Chazal? Concerning how he behaved, concerning making shalom between people, between husband and wife, etc., like we find by Aaron. Why Taka don't we find this by Moshe? Which means for sure he did good things and made shalom when you can, but the stress at this point we don't find by Moshe. Why Taka don't we find it by Moshe? She's moving that portion as is nicht erfahrwas bei Moshe Chas v'Sholem gefällt mir Abbas Yisrael. For sure, it's not because Moshe Taka didn't have their Abbas Yisrael. The other Rabbi Beish Rabbeinu Eiv Yisrael. The Gemara says in Nochas Moshe Rabbeinu is considered. We call him an Eiv Yisrael. It's self-understood, but the Gemara says he was Eiv Yisrael. And he was the shepherd, the trustworthy shepherd of all and every Yid. He provided them with their needs. Say the spiritual needs. He learned, he himself taught Torah to all the Eden. Not only he taught others, and others taught the rest of the Eden. He himself also taught all the Eden. Not only those halachas that Eden pushed had to know what to do, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. But even the pilpul, the discussions in Torah. Because Chazal tell us, that really the pilpul of Torah was given by the Eibishter only to Moshe and his children. And nevertheless, Noag by Tevas Ayim and Osnam Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu behaved with a good eye with it and gave it to all the Eden. So Moshe provided the Eden with things it didn't even have to. In Ruchnias. Also all their physical needs. Only being from the Mon was his Beschus Moshe, beginning with the Mon, which came down only in the merit of Moshe. Bis as die andere Tzrochim, was eine gewinn Beschus Aaron and Miriam, and even the other things, which came in the merit of Aaron and Miriam. You know that the Anani are covered, the fact that they were covered with clouds to protect them came in the Schus of Aaron. The water that they had was Schus of Miriam. So even concerning that, is noch zeir ptire. When they passed away, when when the well of Miriam went away, stopped, and the Anani covered, the clouds stopped. They came back in the Schus of Moshe. So obviously, the Moshe Rabbeinu cared about the Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest Avos Yisrael you can mention. So what do we mean that we don't find in Chazal anything special when the Gay Moshe Rabbeinu is making peace between people? But the pshat is like this. Because of what Moshe was and Moshe's mission, the way he was, his mission was supposed to be different than the way it was by Aaron. In his Avos Yisrael and his bringing shalom between people, Moshe had to behave differently because that was his mission, that was his inyan. The explanation is like this. When the Meifn Avos Shalom from Aaron, the Tzel Chazal, concerning the way Aaron made peace between people, the Chazal tell us, in order to make peace between people, given from the memes, he changed from the truth. He changed. No, the Chazal tell us that he would come to two people had a fight. He would come to one of the two and tell me, no, the other person told me, or something he would hinted that I know the other person wants to make peace with you, but he's embarrassed. So if you go to him, he's ready to make peace. Then he would go to the other guy and say the same thing. I know the other fellow who you're in an argument with really wants to make peace with you. If you go to him and make peace, so that's how you put them together. But it wasn't 100% true because really he didn't hear that each one wanted to make peace. So he had to change. That's the Lashon Chazal. He changed from the memes. This is definitely something you're allowed to do. Not that you're allowed to do, it's the proper thing to do. According to the Torah, it's a proper thing to do. Like Chazal tell us, a person is allowed to make changes when it comes to make peace. So what Aaron did was 100% al Torah and the proper thing to do. But this is the job of Aaron. Moshe Rabbeinu, we know Moshe Rabbeinu, it says in different places in Chazal, his midah is emes, Aaron's midah is chesed. So from chesed, you do all kinds of things to bring chesed, to bring kindness, to make peace between people. Moshe Rabbeinu, that says his midah, says in Nigla, in Chazal, and it says certainly in Chassidus and Kabbalah, that his midah is midah so emes, truth. The Riber by ihm nid ken sein der Eifen von Avos Shalom. Therefore, by Moshe, you couldn't have this way of making peace between people, because this way is not 100% the way it's really be'emes. Because he had to change. This was a change from deviating a little bit from the truth in a way that you're allowed to, but still is deviating from the truth. Even though this concept that you're allowed to make changes when it comes to making peace is kenala herof in Torah, that itself is a lesson that says in Torah, Torah says much is the truth. So you can't say by doing that you're going against the truth. If it's part of Torah and the Torah tells you to do it, then Torah is Torah semes. So that's truth. Like it says, the Rabbi explained another place. The Chazal Bedafke say you're allowed to make a change. It doesn't say you're allowed to lie. Change. It's only a change. Not a lie. A lie is Hepech Torah semes. A lie is against the Torah, which is Torah semes. You're allowed to make a change. So certainly this is something that you're allowed. And this is emes, because Torah says you're allowed to do it, so it's also emes. Nevertheless, if you behave that way, it's a concealment. It is a certain deviation from the truth. Und der Fahri, das nicht maßim zu der Schlichus von dem, was midosei, madrigosei, mechedes, and nicht emes. Therefore, it doesn't fit to this person that his shlichus, his mission in life, and his special madrege, and his midah is midah so emes. So since Moshe Rabbeinu's midah was midah so emes, so this is not his derech and aveda. Derech nanogi shaykh tzaren. This way, shaykh tzaren, which is right. He's supposed to do midah is midah chesed. We know Aaron is the midah of chesed, and b'meila this is a madrege shaykh to him. And the Rebbe explains interesting. When Moshe learned Torah mit Yidden, when Moshe taught the Yidden the Torah, Giter ze iber alle Yonen von Torah. So he told them everything it says in the Torah. Eich di Yerov and Mutter L'Shanis B'dar HaSholem. Even this lesson, Gufa, that you're allowed to make a change when it comes to make peace, he taught them too. But this is part of what the Torah says. And he had to teach them the Torah. Aber wenn es kommt zu seiner eigenen Anhage, but when it comes to his own behavior, was is verbunden mit seinem Madrege, which is connected to his Madrege, his Shlichus, that's his shlichus in this world, because that's his madrege. So he couldn't do such a way. And the Rebbe says, you could add another inyan here. That Moshe is nicht shaykh, and sich echt zazelche was in amatz of yorud. Moshe couldn't lower himself. That wasn't his inyan to lower himself to such people that in such a low level, that the only way you could make shalom between them is to make a change. In other words, even Aaron, when he went and he did this, he made changes. Obviously, if he could have told them the truth and still know that they could make peace, he would have not done it. Obviously, we're talking about people that he saw that the only way I could get them to make peace is by changing. That's when he did it. These are people pretty low that they can't make peace between them unless you go so low to say things which are not 100% truth. So Moshe Rabbeinu, his madrege was so high, he couldn't lower himself to such a madrege. So he couldn't do this. So obviously he did this in a different way, but he couldn't do the way of Aaron. Now, since both ways are right, according to the Torah, Aaron's ways according to the Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu's ways according to his madrege, everyone according to their madrege, he's moving the yesh b'zeh mashem b'zeh. So they're both right. They're both right. There's a mile in each one. There's something each thing has over the other. The mile of Anagis Moshe is the mile of Moshe Rabbeinu's behavior is was in them is talking shum l'tiyah midas that according to the way he behaved, there was no deviation, no turning away at all from the midah, from this attribute of truth. Le'idach gise, on the other hand, is the mile Anagisan. There's a mile in the Aaron's behavior. Was dafke durch ihr der gerecht man bis zum Tachten wie says. Only through the Anhage of Aaron you could reach, you could affect those people who are very, very low. For some those people that you have to change, otherwise it wouldn't work. So only Aaron's derech could reach them. So the mile of Moshe is that it's 100% truth. According to the mile of Aaron, he could reach a lower madrig. Well, the mitver techmus the tam was dafke beptiris Moshe is mutkish malos shel Aaron. And this will explain that dafke when it talks about the passing of Moshe, that's when we talk about the midah of Aaron, the mile of Aaron. Why? Because when Meshach Yimei Chayev Shemeshe, as long as Moshe was alive, then there's given Farnum Midurchfin Zayin Shlichus Valmadim. When he was alive, he had nothing else in his mind. He was only involved in accomplishing his mission. That's all that he thought about. He's a given Kol Kuli Osik in Zayin Eifna Beda. So since he was doing his shlichus, he was completely 100% involved only in his derech aveda that he is supposed to do. Und sein Shlichus Beilam is to turn alles beif mit des Emes. And his shlichus in this world was to do everything in a form of Emes. So Mele Moshe Rabbeinu did not get involved in the derech of Aaron because his inyan is Emes. So his whole lifetime he was only involved in his derech. The time came when Moshe had to go up El Har Neve to the mountain called Neve where he passed away, which means and at Shemashlim given sein Shlichus Olamato, he had finished his mission down here, not gehalten by Eila sein Lamaila, and he was already holding at the level of going up Lamaila to above. Demot is by him given there's man, so they're heading the Maila in Anhogasan. Then came a time when he's able to start thinking about the Maila of Aaron over him, because we said Aaron does have a Maila. They both have a Maila, but Aaron has a Maila. So that's the time for him to think, was bring Shalom to Yadin, that Aaron's Maila is that he could bring peace to everybody, even those low people, which Moshe couldn't. But when can he feel the Maila is when his Aveda is finished? Because as long as his Aveda is there, his Aveda is not that. But when he's over with his Aveda, now, from the side, he could start realizing the Maila of Aaron. And there goes in more details. Al derech der bier in the Maimer HaYidu from Rabbi Yechon HaMazaka Somet from Misoseh. Like I explained in the statement of the Chazal concerning Rabbi Yechon HaMazaka, that Chazal bring that what Rabbi Yechon HaMazaka said before he passed away. What did he say? He said, I know there are two ways. I'm leaving this world. There's two ways we can go. We go to Gan Eden, go to Gehenna. I don't know which path I'm going to be going through. Is he doing the kasha? It's a famous kasha. Wie kommt es, als Rabbi Yechon HaMazaka? How could it be? Rabbi Yechon HaMazaka was given von the Gdele Atanoim, from the biggest Tanoim. Und wie Chazal sagen, became his mouth in the God of Rabbi Yechon HaMazaka. And the Chazal in many places speak about the greatness of Rabbi Echad Mazake. He definitely was careful in doing everything you're supposed to and not doing anything you're not supposed to at all. So by him Zaina Sofik Zergating Gan Eden or the Gehenim, he would have a doubt whether he's going to Gan Eden again. How's it possible? Well, some people must say, well, it was an honor. An honor doesn't mean a fool that he doesn't know where he's holding it. He's holding it, just doesn't give himself credit for it. It's not his, says somebody else would be better than me if they would have what I have. So he was not because of Anives. He really had a sofik if he's going to Gan Eden again. How could that be? We're such a great Tana that he definitely did everything right. So how could he even have a Havamina thought that he might be going to Gehenim? Shteider of the Asbora, so Chassidus explains, even though he knew for sure, comes to the revealed attributes that he had. He knew for sure that it's the highest level, it's completely good. But he was doubtful. Did he accomplish something concerning his etzem nefesh? Because it says sometimes in your etzem nefesh there are things you have to accomplish, and that you don't necessarily know if you did it or not. Because the etzem nefesh is not begilu, it's not revealed. It comes to the revealed parts of the person, what you say and what you think and what you do. These are all what you feel. These are all things that you feel you know. So you know where you're holding. But there are certain things hidden deep down in the nefesh that you don't always know. And that was the Mesufik. Did he accomplish there the right thing that he's supposed to do in something that he doesn't know because it's higher than Gilu? That's the answer they give on that kasha. It's by movement, but that doesn't really answer the whole kasha. If he had a sofik, a doubt, what's the situation in the essence of his nefesh? Is he in level of kedusha, which means he goes to Gan Eden, or is in level of chas v'sholom, the opposite? So if that was real doubt, it says he felt bad, he was worried. Why was he worried only before he passed away? Why didn't he worry about it before, throughout his whole lifetime? He shouldn't be worried about it. He's saying it from the beauty. One of the explanations is like this: throughout his whole life, he was involved only in fulfilling his mission in this world, which is limud atayra latzmei mitantre v'chol, learning himself, learning with others, so etc. etc. Not in gehat kein Zeit zu aufstellen sich und trachten in seiner Madreges. He had no time to stop and think about his levels. Where am I holding with my to something at me? His job was what his shlichus was to learn Torah, to teach Torah, etc., etc. What goes on with there, he had no time to think about it. Close to his passing. When he was at the time when he was finishing his shlichus in this world, he could start contemplating and thinking about what's doing with his etzem nefesh, with the etzem of his nefesh. The same thing here concerning Moshe Rabbeinu. Tafke before he's passing. Moshe finished his mission in this world. He's down by him given this man zu reintrachten sich in die Glücke Madreges zwischen seiner Avede und Avede sein. That's when he had time to start thinking about the difference between his Avede and Avede Van. And that's when he felt that there's something special. The Maila Van he felt then. Till then, he didn't feel it because he was involved in what he has to do, and that's not what he has to do. But now that his job is finished, his mission is finished, now he could start looking into the different Avedas and realize the Maila Van. And the Riber is and that's why when it comes to Torah, writing it in Torah, which is the Torah of Moshe, Dafke in the Psukim v'gemisas Moshe, like the Dafke in those Psukim that talk about Moshe's passing, wird herausgebracht der Meile von Avedas Aaron like Avedas Moshe. That's what the Torah brings out, the Meile of Avedas Aaron, Avedas Moshe, because Moshe Rabbeinu then also realized that, because till then he didn't look into the Meile of Aaron and maybe it should be different, because that's not his mission. That wasn't his mission. But when you're already away from your Aveda because you finished, and now you look at it, now you started feeling that there is a Meile in the Aveda of Aaron. The beer is over nicht ganze Maß. The Rebbe says this explanation is not enough 100%. Since Moshe Rabbeinu's attribute is emes, is truth, so it should be no difference whether he's down here und sich eisig b'shlichus be'almadin, and he's involved in his shlichus in this world, or in the zeit where halt by Lias nishmas l'mayla, or when he's holding about going up l'mayla. B'chol mokim and mokim is in yonei shel Moshe midas emes. Wherever Moshe is, his midah is emes. Favos zoktem, why do we say as be'esis talkusa ved be'im nirgish der emes from der mayla from the that when he before he passed away, that's when he realized that the emes and the mayla of Aaron, his midah is emes. He should never feel that there is a Miley Narins over him when it's not completely emes. Whether it's before he passed away or earlier before he felt that this is not the real emes, and then now it should be the same. So the Rebbe I'll explain it. The lineage from Histalkas Moshe meant need nor Histalkas B'mum Gashmi. When we talk about Moshe Rabbeinu's Histalkas passing, doesn't mean only in the physical sense that he just passed, his body passed away. As Nishmos is Nistalge worden von seinem Gufa, as the Neshama left his body. Nor Sizech Biker Histalkas Vali Ruchnis. The Histalkas means that he elevated, going up means not only leaving this physical body, but means going up to a higher madrege. That's Histalkas. He going up to a higher madrege, a higher spiritual madrege. As ein Neshama Teile events, Hasacha Hecher madrege is Neshama elevated itself to a much, much higher madrege. And like in Order 31, the Rebbe says that he always was going higher and higher. That's for sure. It has to be always Yelchum Achayil Choyel. But this was much different. This was, he went to a higher madrege, completely higher. Vidit Zuvelcher or the Greg Meshechayev Almadin, to those that he reached during his lifetime in this world. So now he like changed, so to speak, his madrege now went so much higher than it was before. Okidua, the Taich, as we know the explanation, which is a biur. It's not only explanation in a pshat in a vort, but it also explains the inyan. In Posuk it says, when it says Vayal Moshe el Har Navei, Moshe went up to Har Navei. That's the place where he was buried. So there's a taich, and the Rebbe brings it here from different places. That what does Navei mean? Navei is a nun and the word bay. Nun bay. Nun bay means 50. Nun is 50. Bay in him. The 50 is in him, which means like this. Throughout his lifetime, he only reached the 49 gates of Bina, of wisdom. The Gemara says that 50 gates of wisdom was created in the world. They were all given to Moshe minus one. That means Moshe reached the highest level a person is able to reach, which is Mem Teshar Bina. Yeah, these 49 gates of Bina. And B'yem P'tirose, the day he passed away, at the Zeiche Ve'ele given some Sharanun. And the 50th, on the day of his passing, he reached the 50th level. He elevated himself. That's what we say, Nun Bay. That's what day he had the Nun also. And the difference between the 49 gates and the 50th gate is Bein Arech. There's no comparison whatsoever. It's not like the 49th compared to the 48th. It's a different level. That's why it says in this world, nobody could reach the 50th gate. Even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't. But Bashasi passed away, he reached a new level. That's a new aliyah. That could be the deeper pshat when it says Moshe went up. Normally, we touch Moshe went up, he went up to the mountain. But the Rebbe is saying went up means he had a new Aveda now, a different Aveda, something different that is, his madrege became different. And the difference is that now he was going up. Now, Chassidus goes into details like this. Moshe's inyan is bringing down godliness down here, which is also called Sheshvina de Malki. We know Chassidus compares the Yidden and the Eibishter as a Chosin and a Kala. Just like a Chosin and a Kala, you have the escorts. There's an escort of the Chosin and escort of the Kala. Moshe Rabbeinu is considered the escort of the Eibishter. Aaron is considered the escort of the Yidden, of the Kala. Now, the Eibishter is Lamailo, and Moshe Rabbeinu's job is to bring the Lakus down. The job of Aaron is like the Kala, she's the Makabal, she has to go to the Chosin. So the Makabal means to elevate the Yidden higher. So Moshe Rabbeinu's normal madreg, it says, regular, is to Shvina de Malke. He's the escort of the Melech, of the king, which means his job is to hamshochem el mayl lamata, to bring godliness down. Well, that's why Moshe brought down the Torah lamata here, from there to here. Moshe kibul Torah misinai Masara. Moshe took the Torah Sinai and brought it down to the Eden. That's Moshe Rabbeinu's union of hamshochem. Shenkin Aaron is Shvina de Malke. Aaron says he's the escort of the queen, like the escort of the Kala. And where do we see that in his Aveda? Moshe we see coming down, bringing down the Torah. What did Aaron do? And it's madlik u'mailad in Neira Samneira. he lit the candles of the menorah, and the lashon and posik is bahaleis chasaneris. You bring it up, but when you make a fire, fire goes up. So he had to make the fire go up. Pasha Begashim is his supposed to light the menorah, and not only just light it. Wait till the fire, the flame goes up now by itself. Because Baruchnius meant us in spiritual level, it means as a heit uf neshamas Yisrael, the candles represent neshamas Yidden. It says Hashem, the neshama of a person is a candle of Hashem. So when he lit the candles, make the candles go up, means he's picking up the neshamas of Yidden as his own steinen aliyah l'sheishim makerim. They should stand in a form of going up to their source, just like fire goes up to its source. That's why it constantly goes up. So Aaron's job is to make Yidden's neshama go up higher. And Moshe's inyan is always the Amshach, and that's the level of Moshe throughout his whole lifetime. And the day he passed away, is Moshe he reached the Madrege higher than himself. Durch dem was bei ihm hat sich aufgetan, the Meile von Aaron Bayal. The Meile of Aaron, we said, is to elevate. That day, Moshe Rabbeinu went beyond his own Madrege, which is Amshocha, Bayal Moshe. He retained also the Meile of Aaron, which is Haloah, Lumata Lamaila, elevating from down up. So Moshe Rabbeinu got the kasha we asked for that his level is emes. So even if he went up to higher madrega, so over there is madrega emes. Why did he feel the mile of Aaron? So we're saying that now he not just went up in his madrega. He got a new level. Now he even got the mile of Aaron, which is the mile of Haloah. This idea that now he got the union of Aaron to elevate is connected to the fact that he merited to get the 50th gate, which means like this: throughout his lifetime, that his aveda was limited according to what his midah is. In other words, he had a certain shlichus, and it was whatever you classify it, and that's what he was, and that's how he had to continue. But by when Allah he got everything he could, but only the 49. He didn't get the 50th. Because the difference between the 50th and the 49 is the 50th is bligvul, that's no limit, and 49 is limited. Limited high madregas. By Moshe, the 49 was a limit in his very high madregas. All within his frame shows the limitation of the world, because 49 is Zion, Pom is Zion, 7 times 7. Which means it's the shleibus of 7, and 7 is shivas me'abinyan. 7 is the 7 days of the creation. A week is made up of 7 days. Sfira is made up of 7 weeks, and each week is 7. Each week of Sfira is 7. There are 7 heavens. 7 represents the high madrigi of creation. That's why Shabbos is the 7th day, but Shabbos is still one of the days of creation. So 49, which is the 7 times 7, is very high madrege, but with framework of the Hagbola of what is. So by Moshe Rabbeinu, it was all within his madrege, in the very high madrege. By him, but when he went up beyond that, which means Aliyah v'Yitziyah for seine Gdor, he went out of his limitations and the boundaries, so to speak. As ein Aved is nicht begrenzt, dafür mitive bigdusha midas emes. And now he went beyond the boundaries of his own madrege. Till now, the madrege was limited only to emes, and you can't go beyond those madreges. Even if it's a good thing, Aaron's madrege is a good thing. Aaron's Aved. But since it's not his Agdora, it's not the borders of not his confinement of what he's supposed to do. So that he didn't have. But now, Vayal, he went out of that. He went to the Bligvul. Now it's not connected to what his madrege is naturally, even if it's a holy nature, which is the Midas Emes. Blazing Kafan Amshocha B'May which be only the way he was, that he was bringing down things from above down and not working with elevating the bottom. No, by him is now he got also the second Aveda, which is the union of being Meile elevating. Is damit verbunden, is der mit verbunden, was zu ihm ist mitten geworden, der Shara Nun Shel Meile Magbola. That's connected to the fact that now he got the Shara Nun. The Shara Nun, the 50th gate, is higher than all these limitations. The Meile now, he was able to have a Madrege, which is not his normal Madrege. And therefore, even though normally the Madrege was Emes, and the other level, which has a Meile, but it's not his Shlichus, now he's not limited to it. And the Meile, now he could feel the Meile in Aaron's Aveda, which is the Aveda of being Mishan, etc., etc. Now, if we'll understand, also concerning the union of Avos Yisrael and bringing peace between people, Moshe and Aaron. Since at the day of his passing, his Aveda became Vayal, he went up, which is Be'etzem Madregas Aaron. Really, it's the Madrega of Aaron bringing up. But the Rebbe Demel that had the Maila of Navor Shalom Shalom, then he felt the Maila in the Shalom, the peace that Aaron brought, was at the Grecht Aliden Kanal. And the Maila that had reached all the Yidden. So Moshe Rabbeinu is not elevating the Tachten. His Aveda was Hamshochem Maila. So there's as far as he could get. So sometimes he can't reach the very, very low. And that's why he couldn't make Shalom in a way which is not emes. But Aaron reached even that. And the day of his passing was not limited to his Madrege B'Meila. Now he felt the Madrege Maila of Aaron, which has a Maila that you reach very low. Yes, Leimer as von dem Allem sagt man noch ein Inyan Begedel Avos Yisrael for Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Rebbe add, you could say that from all this we see another thing which brings out the greatness of Avos Yisrael of Moshe Rabbeinu. In this Psukim was written wegen seines Talkes, in the Psukim that talk about Moshe's passing, is Eimer mi Piatzmei Baruch HaKedesh. This is all Psukim and Chumash Dvorim. Chumash Dvorim was written by Moshe Rabbeinu, it says. It says Chumash Dvorim Moshe mi Piatzmei Omer. Four Chamoshim were said by David, dictated by David to Moshe. Chumash Dvorim, the Gemara said mi Piatzmei, have said on his own, which means Baruch HaKedesh, as Taisva says, it's David's words, but it's a lower, it's a different level. It's a level that he said by himself. So Moshe Rabbeinu is writing these Psukim. So what is the Moshe Rabbeinu writing? He's Madgish Mailos Shalarin. The Maila is stressing the Maila of Aaron. Why did he do it? Moshe is doing this. Kedei as Eden zon davon uplernen, Eden should learn from here. Wie breit und tief es muss sein der Linie von Avos Yisrael. How wide and deep the Linie of Avos Yisrael has to be. As nicht gucken die Kavgeit Leilung for sein Avos Yisrael. But in spite of how great Moshe's Avos Yisrael was sicher hat Eilig given Maila Mekedish Aveshach Michayim and Darga V'Dargans in Avos Yisrael. For sure, he always went higher and higher in his Avos Yisrael because he always went higher and higher. Just like he went higher in holiness and everything that he did. So he went higher in Avos Yisrael. So you can imagine what kind of level Avos Yisrael had at the end of his life. The greatest level of Avos Yisrael. Afal Pekain, still Moshe has so much Avos Yisrael that he does not maspik. Moshe is telling us in the Torah, Moshe wrote it, that it's not enough. You have to behave like Aaron, which is a raid of Shalom. You chase peace, and you give peace, make peace between man and his friend, between a woman and her husband. So this is all part of Moshe Rabbeinu's Avos Yisrael. The Rebbe brings down Moshe Rabbeinu's Avos Yisrael was so great that he came to a point to recognize and tell us, don't be enough what I'm doing, as great as it is, you have to be even more Avos Yisrael. And he felt the mile of Aaron, that it brings the union of Sholem and helping people, even the people who are very low, that there's no other way you could help them unless you change, even that you should do. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu felt at the time of his stalkus, and he wrote it in the Torah for people to know what to do.